even do it. I might even put water to it tonight. So some more water. Let me turn this down. But I'm glad to have you, Jim. When is the podcast on?
It records on Thursdays, but then airs throughout the country over the next week.
Okay, but let's promote that, okay?
Sure.
Let's promote that.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's very important. And we're coming up in, let me give it 30 seconds. Let me come up at one. Hey, Bernadette. Hey, sweetie. Hey, Robert. Snowman. How you doing, sweeties? Everybody like and share, like and share. Help us with the algorithm, please. We need your help. We need your help. We need your help. So I'm finding that after a week or so, we get more than 1 million hits. But I started getting clogged up in the algorithm before. So we're up in 5. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It's a joy to be with you today, an honor to be here as we talk about free speech and the speech that can lead to violence, the verbal violence that can lead to physical violence, and on and on and on it goes. It goes in all directions, everybody. And we've got to be very, very careful because the people who stand at the highest levels of our government are not behaving responsibly. They are isolating the left, a segment of the population. They're weaponizing our politics against us. And I'd feel this way if I had a president who went after the right in a vicious way. Presidents, vice presidents, they are supposed to be unifying figures. They're supposed to rise above their own parties and bring people together and bring us to the higher realms of our natures. That's not what's happening right now. And there's a lot of dishonesty that's happening. A reframing of Charlie Kirk, if you will. A reframing that is dishonest and dangerous. I think that you can honor his life, send love and prayers to his wife and children and his loved ones, his family, and the people who followed him. You can do all of that while being very honest about his views, what he stood for in life. I think he would want us to do that. We don't need to reframe him, recharacterize him. And I think we also need to begin to look at the the crises of conscience that he was having in the final months of his life. Max Blumenthal in The Gray Zone has been writing about that. You got to follow the money. There was a lot that was going on with him. And I think we need to be honest enough, Jim Narakis of Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting, to look at all of that because it will help us to understand what happened to him, because this was a public execution in the way that James Meredith was almost executed while he was on his walk for freedom in Mississippi. Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Robert Kennedy, John F. Kennedy. We can keep on going on and on and on, but I want to look at 5 little girls, 4 of whom died 62 years ago today, September 15th, 1963, almost as a punch in the eye at the civil rights movement, just 2 weeks after Dr. King's iconic speech at the Lincoln Memorial, after more than 250,000 Americans gathered, marching for jobs and freedom and justice and equality. We think of John Lewis today, and we think of Bayard Rustin, who, with his prodigious gifts as an organizer, been pulling together, he and A. Philip Randolph have been pulling together this March on Washington for decades, Jim Narakis. And it came to fruition in 1963. President John F. Kennedy was afraid that this march was going to erupt in violence. They barely had any garbage on the ground. Mahalia Jackson brought Dr. King on. He was the last speaker, and he told you about his dream, but it was preceded by John Lewis, who told you about what the students in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee were fighting for. It was preceded by so many people. You saw Charlton Heston and Sammy Davis and Diane Carroll and Jim Garner and on and on and on and on. People who flew in from everywhere. Joan Baez, Peter, Paul, and Mary. We can just keep on going. Lena Horne, so many people. Harry Belafonte, Sidney Poitier, people who were pulling in the same direction, whatever their political affiliations that we saw in time. But just 2 weeks later, 4 little girls, well, all of these children were in Sunday school in Birmingham, known as Birmingham, Alabama. And a white right wing racist had wired the place and bombed it and killed these 4 little girls. But there was one survivor. So today I want to dedicate the show to Addie Mae Collins, whose sister, Sarah, survived, but not without tremendous scars. Denise McNair, who perished with her, Carol Robertson, Cynthia Wesley, 11 to 14 years of age, little girls, 4 little girls, 4 little girls. If you want to talk about political violence, think about that. All of the examples that I mentioned were from the right wing. George Wallace was shot by someone who was looking for fame, or so they say. But I think of the Speaker Emerita in Minnesota, Melanie Hortman, and her husband, who were killed, just killed at home. And State Senator John Hoffman and his wife, who were shot, but they survived. Think of these people. And we can go on and on and on. Governor Shapiro, thank goodness his family survived a bombing at the governor's mansion in Pennsylvania. It goes back and forth and back. But Charlie Kirk's situation there was a lot more to it than that. You see the media trying to reframe this, to take us away from where he was struggling. You know, what he was fighting for. He was not fighting, Jim Norikis, a right and left fight when he was killed. Oh, no. He was asking about the Epstein files. He wanted to know if people in our government were being blackmailed. There was a lot that was going on. He was in a fight with his donors. He was in a fight with President Trump about striking Iran. So, as we look at this today, now you have this clampdown in the name of all of that, in the aftermath of all of that. You have our own Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, who's trying to pull the passports of Americans, Jim Norikis. I just wanted to give it the frame, and I hope I'm giving it the correct frame, because as we're doing this punching back and forth, this back and forth pull and push and pull that we're doing, we have got a Secretary of State who's looking at pulling our passports just because the people whose passports he's pulling, the visas he's pulling, are those people who've been calling for a ceasefire, who've been calling for an end to the killing of Palestinians. What is happening here? I mean, this thought policing is very, very, very dangerous. And I'm looking at the corporate media who are framing this in a way that I think, Jim, is irresponsible, because they're not giving us the proper frame. They're not giving us enough information. They're putting people into silos. What is Marco Rubio calling for?
There was a bill introduced in the House that would allow Rubio to withhold the passports of U.S. citizens who are, quote, supporting terrorism, unquote. And supporting terrorism in this context means criticizing Israel. Because if you criticize Israel, then you're obviously on the side of Hamas, and therefore you're a terrorist. We have seen that free speech rules no longer apply to non-citizens in the United States, where people are being deported explicitly because of their views expressed. And apparently this is going to be now extended towards citizens as well. I think that Trump's statement after the murder of Charlie Kirk is really worth reading and taking seriously. His announcement was that it's long past time for all Americans and the media to confront the fact that violence and murder are the tragic consequence of demonizing those with whom you disagree. For years, those on the radical left have compared wonderful Americans like Charlie to Nazis and the world's worst mass murderers and criminals. This kind of rhetoric is directly responsible for the terrorism that we're seeing in our country today, and it must stop right now. my administration will find each and every one of those who contributed to this atrocity and to other political violence. He's basically saying that rhetoric is, in other words, speech is responsible for violence, and therefore the government is going to stop it, is going to presumably prosecute people for saying things like saying that the Trump administration is a fascist government. That would be the kind of thing that you could be apparently prosecuted for. And this is in the MAGA land, in the MAGA world. This is now the order of business. Stephen Miller today, talking to J.D. Vance on Charlie Kirk's podcast, said, the last message that Charlie sent me was that we needed to have an organized strategy to go after the left-leaning organizations that are promoting violence in this country. And again, promoting violence here means criticizing people, because if you hear criticism, then someone might commit violence, and therefore that criticism has to be stopped. Miller called it a vast domestic terror movement. We're going to use every resource we have at the Department of Justice, Homeland Security, and throughout this government to identify, disrupt, dismantle, and destroy those networks and make America safe again for the American people.
But Jim, he is going after Charlie Kirk. This is the criticism in which he was engaging in the final months of his life. I mean, you saw this interview with Megyn Kelly at the Turning Point USA conference that they just had a couple of months ago. He was platforming people who were critical of American policy. So what is he talking about?
Well, Charlie Kirk is very useful as a martyr. He's someone who can be presented as the victim of a left-wing conspiracy of people who have been critical of the Trump administration. Those who bring order to our country is how Trump described it. Whether Kirk himself or would have agreed with this or not is beside the point. He's not able to contribute to the discussion now.
Yeah, but his podcast, Levon, and more than that, he was being attacked. He was being assailed by his own followers for following the regular line. I mean, he even went to the White House and told President Trump, look, attacking Iran, you got to take that off the table. And President Trump, according to press reports, became very angry with him and said, no, I'm going to do this. And so they were at odds. They were not on the other side, but certainly they were engaged in a rigorous debate that these people are tamping down. And clearly he is being used as this foil for that conversation. But Jim, I'm not hearing corporate media bring any of that out. They are really pushing a line that is pushing people on one side of the aisle or the other.
No, you have to be. This is a moment very much like after September 11th, when there is a very heightened sense that people have to be careful what they say, and that deviating from the accepted script, the approved rites of mourning, can be punished, and people are losing their jobs because that they have questioned the narrative that's being put forward about Kirk's death. Karen Nataya from the Washington Post, the Post's only black columnist, was fired because she raised questions about how Kirk was being mourned and what uses that mourning was being put to.
But hold on, because she wasn't given due process. I mean, she first said, you mourn a human being, you mourn a husband, a father, you mourn him because he was killed. This was a horrific thing. She established that. What happened?
She raised questions about the way that some deaths are raised up and some are ignored, about how there is a racial aspect to the people who are able to be criticized after their death, and people who are considered it's considered sort of a blasphemy, a sacrilege to talk about, in many cases, what they said. To quote Charlie Kirk and some of the more incendiary things that he said is seen as really kind of a desecration of his memory, to remember him. And people are, as I said, people are losing their jobs. And then I think that encourages in media an extreme carefulness about what people are saying, a limitation on the discussion. And I think it's ironic that this is being done in the name of I suppose a champion of free speech. That we should honor his memory by firing people who are not on board with celebrating him.
What is this doing to dissent overall?
I think we are in a really serious position where we may look back and think, remember when we could say what we thought in public without worrying too much about whether we would be prosecuted by the government over it. So a statement, a tweet by Laura Loomer, who is a close friend of Donald Trump, one of the people outside the government who is thought to have the most influence on him, and is the direction of the administration. And she said, "I have to say, I do want President Trump to be the dictator the left thinks he is. And I want the right to be as devoted to locking up and silencing our violent political enemies as they pretend we are."
And she has tremendous sway.
Yeah.
In the administration, and not just in the administration. She has tremendous sway in the shaping of policy. I mean, she's got people fired from presidential appointed positions. Help me to understand, what are we living through right now? I mean, because let me back that up. Do you think was it appropriate for the vice president to host Charlie Kirk's podcast today as a partisan?
Right. Well, we are seeing kind of a merger between the government and media, and FAIR has always been critical of the overly close relationship between our media establishment and the government.
Like what we see at the White House Correspondents' Dinner.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that the way that Skydance is buying up CBS and now is trying to buy up CNN, Skydance being bankrolled by Larry Ellison, who the world's richest human being, who's very close politically to Trump, supported his false claims to have won the 2020 election. Has
and putting Bari Weiss on top of the news,
right, and agreed to install former Trump appointee to be the ombud of CBS, to look out for anything that would be considered objectionable by Trump appointee. I think that we're seeing, and when you think about the number of Fox News officials, Fox News personalities that are now in government, we're seeing a real merger between media and state, which is something that FAIR has always called for a separation from.
why should the state and media and the press be separate? God bless you. Why do you think that? I mean, because our own Constitution protects the press, you know. So if you can tell me why the Constitution protects the press and why it's important for the press and the government to be separate and separated entities.
Well, you cannot have a democracy unless the public has some idea of what their government is doing, and the public cannot have an accurate idea of what the public is doing if the same people who are carrying out policies are the people who are telling you about the policies. You need to have some separation there so that we can have some faith that we actually know what's going on. But the First Amendment I think in my lifetime I have not seen a time when the First Amendment has been so under attack, where the chair of the FCC is openly saying that he wants to take away licenses from TV stations because he doesn't like the way they report the news. Where the president can sue news outlets for editing interviews in ways that he doesn't like, and he can win those suits, even though nothing in the law says that he has the right to sue over these things. But because he has the power of the government, the power of the FCC, to punish the networks and take away the licenses that they need to conduct business, they're caving in, and they're paying him millions of dollars to settle these completely spurious lawsuits. And the courts don't seem to be having any problem with this. What amounts to a repeal of the First Amendment, at least as it applies to broadcast journalism. And that so the idea of now we're going to talking about taking away passports from citizens who are dissenting. It's just one more step down the road towards the complete elimination of free speech. And the ironic thing is that it's being done in the name of free speech, because if you allow people to speak freely, someone might react to your criticism and commit an illegal act, and that would silence someone with that illegal act. And so, in order to preserve the ability of somebody like Charlie Kirk to keep speaking, we need to silence many other people, because as long as we're allowed to criticize, we put people like Charlie Kirk in danger. And that is the rationale that is being offered for why we're going to have a rollback of free speech like I have not seen in my lifetime.
What about Stephen Miller? I mean, I know you only have a few minutes left here, because he's someone who is quite incendiary in his rhetoric. And he's the deputy chief of staff at the White House. And he says that he is going to use law enforcement to dismantle the left. Help me with this. And I don't see corporate media amplifying that, explaining that, bringing him on to any station but Fox, any network but Fox, to talk about it. Is that responsible?
Well, I think that the corporate media, the problem is in the name. They're corporate, and I think that from the point of view of the people in the class that own our news outlets, the billionaires and multimillionaires who are the people who own the stock and are on the boards, they are really more worried about a left that is talking about how billionaires have too much money than they are about a right wing that is sketchy about freedom of speech. And I think there is a history of people thinking that far right politicians can be used as a tool against the left to benefit wealthy people. And wealthy people have often found out, to their dismay, that once the far right people are in power, they're interested in taking the wealthy's property, not to redistribute as the left would, but just to keep. And that's an irony of history that we've seen again and again, and we may see that again in the near future. But I think that the reaction to the nomination of Zohran Mamdani in New York City for mayor shows how, even in this era where there really are obvious signs of the possible end of democracy, where the president is openly saying that he's considering running for an unconstitutional third term, where the idea of taking people's passports away for being dissidents, even despite the clear and present danger that the MAGA ideology is posing to democracy, the corporate media gets far more exercised, far more alarmed by someone like Zohran Mamdani, who is talking about freezing rents in New York City. And that is seen as a scarier prospect than Donald Trump and Stephen Miller.
And free bus rides.
Yeah.
Which people need, because New York, as we all know, you live there, I've lived there, it is a very expensive city. It's a very expensive city, and you don't get a lot for your money in terms of housing. What did the gentleman say when he was running for mayor some years ago? The rent is too DAMN high.
Yeah.
He said that, and it's true.
It's true. And it's much higher now.
Yeah. Bless his heart. And so I'm just saying, I'm really trying to process all of this, because this language has gotten so aggressive. It is so mean-spirited, and it is casting a pall over the country. It's casting a pall over the country, and they are stoking so much anger, and we will all reap the whirlwind. I don't see anyone winning.
Yeah.
I don't see anyone winning. I mean, help me make this make sense to me.
I wish I could.
Okay, because honestly, I'm very uneasy about what it is that we're doing. Very, very uneasy, and it really is. It's really frightening. I mean, even if I say so myself, I'm like, you all, we really need to pay attention to what it is that we are, what it is that we're seeing, what we're looking at, because this to me is very, very dangerous.
People, if you are on the radio, which means that there is a license that radio station has. And the FCC has announced that it is very willing to yank people's licenses if they don't like what people are saying. So you really, it's no longer a situation where one is assumed to have free speech, and unless you're advocating violence in a very direct way. And if a couple other exceptions, you can say whatever you want. That is the traditional interpretation of the First Amendment. That no longer applies. We have a new ball game where the subjective views of the president about what is fair and unfair are going to be used to decide who gets to have a platform to speak and who does not.
Before you go, you have a podcast. I know you tape it on Thursdays, but I listen to it every week, and I check Fair out, fair.org every single day because I need to um, I need to get a read on what it is that I'm seeing. I mean, if I want to know the backgrounds of the journalists who are doing the reporting, if I want to get more information on the story, I go to Fair. I support Fair, and I support Fair because Fair supports us. And of course, I'll just bring him up before you go. Uh, Founder of Fair, of course, Jeff
Jeff,
Cohen.
how you doing?
And
Hello, Jim. Hello, Santita.
sending you so much love today. Jim, how can we hear the podcast and how can we support FAIR? I think we need to support FAIR now more than ever before. Fairness and accuracy in reporting.org, everybody. Yes.
The show is called Counterspin. It's heard on about 100 community stations, public stations across the country. You can also listen to it on our website. You can download it or listen to it directly, and it's available through podcasting services, like Apple and so on.
And it's
Counter.
fair.org,
That's
fair.org.
I'm trying to let people know what they're looking for because sometimes, they jam you in Google. When you're Googling it, you have to, if I don't know what I'm looking for,
Right.
I am, and I've tested them out because Fair's been on our radar for a long, long, long time because you've been making so much sense for so long. That having been said, it is fair.org, but I want you to look for fairness and accuracy in reporting, depending upon, thank you, Chaparral, fair.org. But if you get lost in the algorithm, if they try to turn things out for you, FAIR stands for, it's the acronym for fairness and accuracy in reporting. And you need to know that. And you need to let your friends know about it. Get the link. We just posted it. And please support FAIR as they support us. Jim Narakis, would you like to say anything before you go?
I just want to say Jeff is one of the great media critics of our time. He's our founder, and he was also the person who married my wife and I. So I'm also grateful to him for that.
I officiated at the wedding.
Isn't that wonderful? We love Janine. Look, I'm so old. I remember when she was having a baby. I'm like, oh, the child, oh my gosh. But this is so wonderful. But you all do such magnificent work at FAIR. And please support FAIR and check out Counterspin and download that podcast every single week. Support them as they support us. Sending you so much love. You and Janine.
Thanks. Take care.
Thank you. And of course, we welcome Jeff Cohen back on the air here. You're part of the family and brilliant media critic. And of course, Cable News Confidential. That is your book. Oh boy. I remember when I saw you on MSNBC and your misadventures in corporate media, which brings us to where we are today. Because, I'm trying to figure out where we are. And of course, as an academic, you can really help us because I'm looking at the vice president anchor a podcast today. And they're acting as if Charlie Kirk, well, they turned him into a martyr. And certainly, hey, I actually cried when on the air when I found out that he had died because, I will admit, everybody, I'm traumatized by assassinations because I had to live with the threat of it every single day of my life. And I'm about the only person in a certain group of people who got a chance to keep my father until adulthood. I mean, my friends, the Shabazz sisters and the King family and the Evers family, I can just keep on going. They did not get a chance to do that. And when I'm with them, I have survivor's guilt. And they will all tell me how fortunate I was to have had my father into maturity. So I take assassinations very seriously. And the fact that his wife was there, whatever you think about their politics, take that off the table, everybody. Give them that as human beings. That having been said, we cannot go away from his legacy and what he did. That got Karen Attire from the Washington Post fired. She did offer compassion. That having been said, but then she said, now, but this is his legacy, and that's important for us to do. But what do you make of the vice president being at the helm of the podcast today with the incendiary Stephen Miller as a guest? I mean, was that appropriate, Jeff Cohen? I mean, was it?
Well, it's what we've come to expect from these guys. They don't care about the rule of law. They don't care about the right to dissent. This assassination was horrific. Everyone on the left has said it from minute one. You just said it beautifully. Your dad witnessed Martin King's assassination.
Oh, yeah.
So in Memphis. So, I mean, no one on the left has made light of this. Everyone's condemned it. And yet they're using it, the right wing, as an excuse to persecute progressive-minded people, liberal-minded people, centrist people. And we always knew what Vance was capable of, what Bannon, Miller, what Trump's capable of. I think the education that we've all gotten in the last few months is these liberal corporate institutions cannot be trusted. These middle-of-the-road mainstream institutions like the media, like the universities, they have no principles whatsoever. They don't care about free speech. I mean, in academia, UC Berkeley's president, University of California, statewide, the office of the president turned over to the Trump administration a list a few days ago of 160 students, professors, or staff for the Trump people to investigate. The last time a list like that was bandied about that could get you to lose your job, lose your education, it was the height of the 1950s with the Joe McCarthy witch hunts against anyone who stood up for peace, anyone who stood up for human rights and civil rights. We know what happened in that dark era, and we're back in it. And we're back in it for the same reason we were in it 75 years ago, which is that these middle-of-the-road mainstream institutions have no principles, and they are willing to sell out. They are timid. They will always cower before the right wing. The firing of this columnist that you referred to at the Washington Post is more of the same. She did nothing wrong. She condemned the assassination, and then she quoted what is just gutter racism on the part of Charlie Kirk.
From him. She said what he said.
It's his words. Charlie Kirk, as everyone knows by now, unless they watch only right-wing media or only corporate media, I'm not even sure CNN has allowed this, but Charlie Kirk said about 4 Black women, Joy Reid, Michelle Obama, Sheila Jackson Lee, Ketanji Brown Jackson, quote, "You do not have brain processing power to be taken really seriously. You had to go steal a white person's slot to be taken seriously," quote unquote. Charlie Kirk. So we should not forget that he trafficked in racism. He trafficked in hate. It doesn't mean he should be assassinated, that's for sure. But if you're at the Washington Post, a columnist, she's not a reporter, she's a columnist.
Wait a minute, where democracy dies in darkness.
Of course, it's dying in bright light because of the owner of the Washington Post and the editors at the Washington Post. It's happening. We saw what happened at Paramount CBS. The head of 60 Minutes, one of the most profitable TV shows in history, had to go. He quit in protest. Then his boss, the head of CBS News, quit in protest. And Paramount, CBS, has said, we're going to do the bidding of the Trump administration. You've got one company after another in the media that has said, we are bowing down to Trump. And you have one university after another, Columbia, NYU, now University of California. They're all bowing down. And these are the institutions you thought would stand up for the right to dissent, for freedom of the press. We knew what Trump and Vance and Bannon and Miller stood for. They have fascistic tendencies. It's not hate speech to say that. We've proven it in article after article. Look at the way they're trying to militarize society, send in the military everywhere, to LA, to Washington, D.C., next to Memphis, and probably coming to Chicago. They are taking classic fascistic moves. We need to resist those moves nonviolently. And we have to understand that the allegedly liberal media or allegedly liberal universities are not our friends. There are professors that are our friends, but the administration in university after university has caved in. And now, Santita, you sent me this article where there's now a bill, apparently it's going to be discussed on Wednesday, that would allow Secretary of State Rubio, completely on his own, without any due process, to strip people of their passports. Again, we've regressed 75 years. Remember, the great advocate for Black freedom, Paul Robeson, they took his passport away in 1950. The incredible independent journalist, I.F. Stone, they took his passport away in 1950. And then W.E.B. Du Bois, the great civil rights hero and academic, they screwed around with his passport.
And he just left the country.
Yeah, they basically kicked him out. Charlotta Bass, there's a history of defending civil rights and African-American people. And they screw around. This is all happening in the late 40s, early 1950s. And now there's a law that Rubio, without any due process, will be able to strip U.S. citizens. He's already stripped non-citizen permanent residents because they either wrote a column or they took part in protests against genocide on the campus at Columbia University, stripped them of their permanent residency and jailed them. But now they're talking about a bill that would allow U.S. citizens to lose their passports if Rubio, the Secretary of State, alone, solo, makes the decision that somehow these groups are supporting terrorism. And remember, you had today Vance singling out an article in The Nation magazine and saying he's going to go after the Soros, the Open Society Fund, and the Ford Foundation. I mean, because they funded The Nation magazine. They actually haven't funded The Nation magazine. They got their facts wrong, as they usually got their facts wrong. And now there's going to be a witch hunt because of an article in The Nation magazine. I read every article The Nation has published on Charlie Kirk, including before he was assassinated and all the times after. And every article condemns the assassin, condemns the assassination. But we have a witch hunt. This is their pretext. They told us what they were going to do in Project 2025. They were going to look for a pretext to declare emergencies and the Insurrection Act and go after the political opposition. And that's what they're doing this week.
And, you know, and I must acknowledge Abraham Arcila Carreño from Venezuela. He says, the United States continues to interfere with Venezuela. I tell them, stop doing it. God is on our side. We will never be anyone's backyard. We are a sovereign country. Amen to that. And I must say, my heart goes with you and my support. My father had the profound honor, Jeff, of being the last person to eulogize President Chavez before President Maduro. And, you know, such was President Chavez's regard for Reverend, but more than that, for our struggle here.
Yes.
And you know, and that's why I am so concerned, because when I look at Charlie Kirk and his struggles over the past, really in the last 2-3 months of his life, I mean, even going to the White House, do not strike Iran. That's a bad thing. Being booed by his base, by his supporters, because he was taking the standard line on the Middle East. I'm not saying that he was trying to save the babies of Gaza. No. But what he did say was, we need the Epstein files, and we need to know uh, if our government is compromised. I mean, and that's a fair question, but they have hijacked his platform for another end, and it does not benefit us. What we're doing with Venezuela right now, Jeff Cohen, which the media don't report fairly, they don't report it in a full way. We have weaponized millions of people against us. For
Yeah.
all the Venezuelans who have been pushed here, you've got millions who are at home who are saying, come to Venezuela, if you will. You're looking at Marco Rubio, who has gone out of his way to be critical of the government, not the regime, everybody, the government of Cuba. And he's criticizing them for things that he's trying to impose upon us here. Now I understand why they were kicked out of Cuba.
Yeah, that's the irony. You've really hit on it. That's the irony.
Oh, I know. Look, my grandmother picked beans down there and chopped sugar cane when she was a child. And I said,
Yeah.
I now see why they got kicked out of Cuba, because these people are awful. Help me on this.
Yeah. Well, it's just, look, the history of the U.S. empire in Latin America. Anytime there's been a social movement there, or a government that decided, instead of just serving the rich landowners, they were going to try to redistribute wealth and power to the poor and working class. The U.S. has gone in and overthrown governments, overthrew a democracy in Guatemala in the 50s, overthrew a democracy in Chile in the 70s. It's a long, sordid history of U.S. intervention. And Trump and Rubio are taking it now to the nth degree. Both Democratic and Republican administrations have taken part in this, what can only be called imperialistic approach to Latin America. But Trump and Rubio are going, they destroyed a ship. We don't know who was on it.
Oh my gosh.
In the name of the war on drugs. Again, it's always in the name of something, and it's never what it says it's supposed to be. Like in the name of combating anti-Semitism, they're persecuting. Yeah, they're persecuting Jews.
Like, what are you doing?
The professor, the only professor who has come forward that I'm aware of and saying she's on that list of 160 staff, students, professors that the University of California president has turned over to the Trump administration for investigation, and apparently some of them are going to lose their jobs. That particular person is Jewish. Judith Butler, she's famous. So, my daughter, this, Santita, my daughter was arrested with Jewish Voice for Peace because Khalil Muhammad, Mahmoud Khalil, was kidnapped. And all these Jewish individuals who are critical of the state of Israel, but proud to be Jewish, they staged a protest at Trump Tower, and my daughter was one of those who got arrested. So 100 people got arrested. So this idea, it's always in the name of war on drugs. It's in the name of combating anti-Jewish hate, when Jews are in the forefront of trying to change U.S. policy toward Israel, or in favor of Israel, 110%. So it's always a smokescreen, but they've been waiting for this now for 7 months. And they're taking this assassination, which was a horrific, condemnable act, and they're going to milk it for all they can. And they're going to try to subvert the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. And it's scary. I'm a student of the 40s and 50s. I was born in 51, but I know these people that were persecuted. Many of them were African Americans. They were persecuted because they were in progressive groups. They fought for civil rights well before the 1960s, and many of them were deported. They were stripped of their passports. They lost their jobs. They lost their jobs as educators. They lost their jobs in unions. They lost their jobs in government and campuses. They lost their jobs. We're back in that moment, which, it's been understood by historians right, left, and center that the late 40s, 1950s, what did Lillian Hellman call Hellman? She called it the scoundrel era or so.
The great playwright.
Yeah. And everyone was turning in everyone. People are turning in. You had to name the names of all your friends in order to keep your job in Hollywood or on a college campus. We're heading in that direction. And it's important for people of goodwill who understand this to resist nonviolently every way that we can.
Help me to, because Max Myrick is in Washington, D.C., where they're occupied. And he's talking about the rise of Hitler, the Nazi Party. That also go back to the slave catchers, which is how we got our police force in the United States. I mean, we've had these periods. We can go to Europe, but we can stay right here in the United States and see these moments in which we've done that. Because the 50s were looking at people who were fighting in the 20s and 30s and 40s for freedom and justice, and they went back and grabbed these people and tried to destroy them decades later. How do we resist? And I say that as we commemorate the 62nd anniversary of the Birmingham church bombing that happened today, 62 years ago. There were 5 little girls. There was one who survived, and I've got to call their names again: Addie Mae Collins, and her sister Sarah survived, but Addie Mae died. Denise McNair, Carol Robertson, Cynthia Wesley. And of course, when we look at Minnesota, just weeks ago, you had the Speaker Emerita of the House, Melissa Hortman, and her husband killed in their homes. Then you had State Senator John Hoffman and his wife. Thankfully, they survived. I mean, we've got this violence, and I'm seeing. I don't know if I've ever seen. We didn't have podcasts, but to see not a vice president, but the vice president of the United States to step so overtly into a space attacking Americans.
Right, and saying that they're going to go after the radical left.
Yes.
You've gone through a lot of the violence against ideological violence against Black people or against Democrats. Every study, and some of them have been reported on in independent news outlets in the last few days, every study of ideologically motivated violence has shown most of it has come from the right wing, not from the left. Everyone knows this. It's not debatable. Brookings Institution, you go to, all these academics who study ideologically motivated violence. But here you have this incident. We don't even know what motivated that obviously confused youth, 22 years old, to do what the dastardly thing that he did. But it's a minority of examples. And yet they're going to use this example to try to clamp down on the First Amendment, clamp down on universities, clamp down on media. The media bosses are firing their own for quoting Charlie Kirk. I mean, we are almost beyond parody. This is almost, if this wasn't so serious, it would be laughable. How the facts are all wrong, how the fingers are being pointed in the wrong direction. How we're tearing up the Constitution over all of these false claims that anti-Semitism is rampant on campus. It's not. Or that the radical left are full of violent hate and killing that's not happening. And in many of these cities, there's still too much crime in every city, but in every one of these cities they're targeting, crime's been coming down. If you had a decent federal government, it would be saying, wow, you've come down 30%, 35%. What can we do to help you keep it coming down? Not how can we suspend what you're doing and send in the troops because we want a power grab and we want to scare people and we want to intimidate and we want to show the ability of this White House to use the military against civilians. So it's a very scary time. Rootsaction.org, which I co-founded with Norman Solomon, and David Swanson is one of our leaders. I encourage people to get our email. We send out something every day or two. We're resisting the onslaught and the scapegoating of the, quote, radical left, which somehow includes the Ford Foundation and George Soros. No, I'm sorry. They've never been on the radical left. But it's gotten crazy. And, you know, it's easy for individuals listening to your show, Santita, or watching it, as individuals to just go into a total funk of despair. The only antidote, the only way to deal with it is through joining organizations. I don't care what it is, whether it's Rainbow Push, NAACP, rootsaction.org, fair.org. You've got to join with other people in this resistance, because if you're isolated, if you're atomized, and you're looking around at what's happening to our country, then you're going to go into despair and you're going to go into inaction. This is a time when we need nonviolent action, more action.
And support our young people.
Yes.
We've got our young people, if not now. You have Jewish Voice for Peace, no question. But if not now, I met them through you, and I've been so moved by them and their activism. And I look at the tribe here, this tremendous media outlet, young people are really trying. And we need to come together, everybody. Come together, because the whole American experiment, I think, Jeff Cohen, is at stake.
Yep.
And I just think it's ironic that we're talking about this as we remember the 5 little girls, one
Yes.
with tremendous scars, as we remember our lawmakers in Minnesota, as we thank God that Governor Shapiro and his family were safe from that bombing of the governor's mansion. I mean, and on it goes. And this kind of talk, Jeff Cohen, all it does is turn up the temperature.
Yeah.
So what is the final thing that you'd like to say before we go?
Well, I just reiterate what you said. They're involved in an inflammatory exercise of turning up the heat, when what we really need is to focus on the first principles of what you call the American experiment. And those principles include the right to dissent, the right to work nonviolently for a more perfect union. You totally nailed it when you talked about young people. The younger generation, the most anti-racist generation we have. Charlie Kirk and his movement were largely white, but there are all these other groups. And when the pollsters investigate and ask people about racism, about women's equality, about respecting LGBTQ rights, the group that's the most embracing of difference and of our multicultural country are young people.
Absolutely.
So that's the only thing that gives me hope, but also forming organization. That's why we set up rootsaction.org. That's why I formed fair.org back in 1986. You need organization. Your dad, has been in organization after organization, beginning with SCLC alongside Martin Luther King Jr. That church that was bombed, and we're commemorating that anniversary. It was a civil rights church. It was targeted for a reason, because they organized for civil rights. What was it? The 16th Street Baptist Church.
Absolutely.
So, and Angela Davis was a young person in Birmingham.
As was Condoleezza Rice.
Yeah.
And they were all profoundly.
Yes, it changed their lives.
It changed their lives.
Yeah.
And they both speak of it. Now, politically, they are on opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
They are brought together by that moment.
Yeah.
Because they all knew these 5 little girls. They all played together.
Yeah, that's right.
But I thank you for all that you're doing, everybody. I love Jeff Cohen, and I want you to get this book. It kind of made me giggle, but because really, I understand cable news. I've been in it. Cable News Confidential. You've got to get it. You've got to see his misadventures in corporate media, because it is something. It's something to behold. But
as we've learned from the African American community and the African American movement, You sometimes have to laugh to keep from crying.
You
And that's what the book's about. The book is a very lighthearted look at how bad cable news is and how much potential it has, but how it doesn't live up to it. All right, I'm going to say goodbye. Great being with you, Santita.
Sending you
And
so much
good
love.
luck to your folks.
Oh,
Bye-bye.
thank you. My love to you. My
Bye-bye.
love to you, everybody. God
Yeah.
bless you. AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. See you tomorrow.